how are those
So
issues being addressed?
I mean, once again, I think I did not communicate it so well. If you go and talk to the people, this is exactly what you hear, that there is a problem of why should I go to college because I won't get a job. There is discrimination, and even admissions in college there is discrimination. But when you look at large-scale data, which I summarized, you find that the earnings differentials are essentially because of endowments. Participation in regular jobs is also essentially because of endowments. Returns to education are actually higher for Muslims, although they are a little volatile. So there is a difference between what you get when you talk to the community and get their feeling about perceptions. But when you analyze large-scale data, you find that endowments do matter. If I get educated, I get better salaries. And discrimination is not, nobody's saying that discrimination is not there, but despite that, a better endowment gets rewarded both in terms of getting a job and in terms of higher earnings. So when returns to education are high, chances of getting a regular job are high with education. Why shouldn't they? I mean, so both are empirical realities. Either there is a disconnect between the macro and the micro. Yeah.
I have a comment to add to what you said. I'd say that in India, because of the exam system, which is not perfect, which imposes a great strain, basically they are, as long as you are in a particular category, they are origin blind. I can say that because I used to be in the service and I have never seen anyone discriminated at entry on the basis of their caste, religion, or anything. I would say because it's a simple exam-based system. You walk in, you write the exam. Now, arguably, you can say that because particular communities are not as well trained, they suffer a disadvantage whilst taking the exam. But once you're writing the exam, all that it has is your roll number. That is it. If I'm checking a notebook, all I have is the roll number. I don't know who the person is. And I think that's much better than the system here. If you look at the system here, in some ways, it is much more okay, whether you are Asian, you're Latino, even Stanford has all these considerations. IIT doesn't. You just write an exam, and I'm an IIT reject. I wasn't studying at 17, so I failed to get in. So the point is that is completely discrimination blind. And I really hold, I have differences with the Indian system. I resigned, but that is one thing I'm proud of in India, that we have a good entrance exam system.
But to supplement that, when we looked at the chances of Muslims getting the civil services or IIMs, we found that once they reach the interview stage, the chances are as good as anybody else, right? But it's a small proportion of the total jobs. So what he's saying may be true for jobs which are available in the private sector or the lower end jobs and so on. So it's very difficult to understand this story of discrimination. I've been grappling with it for some time, and both kinds of, you get stories which are consistent with both kinds of communities.
Actually, there are ways of discrimination even in the school system. For example, in our state, Andhra Pradesh, like Telugu as a first language versus Telugu as a second language. Those who take it as a first language are Hindus. Those who take it as a second language are mostly Muslims, like minorities. So there is a discrimination through that angle. That's
it's a deep literature on this.
Yeah.
If you know English well, you'll do better.
Oh, yeah,
if you know English well because you're not a Muslim.
Yeah.
That cuts across. That cuts across. I would say
there's
communities.
more to that. Okay, we can discuss it.
And back to this, the affirmative action, what you're talking about, yeah, it's fine. But then, as you said, from the political point of view, it's going to be very difficult to, stop the current reservation system and come up with a different mechanism. So, what is the mechanism now? We can we have to stay with whatever we have for the SCs, STs, and OBCs. So what can be done for the minorities?
So then, even if you go by what is constitutionally possible now and politically being talked about, then the Muslims get reservation through the OBC quota, which has been there for quite some time. The only difference now is that some politicians are talking about quotas for Muslims in general, and not only those Muslims who are who belong to other backward classes. So that reservation has been there for quite some time, and whatever little information that we collected during the Sachar Committee proceedings, we found that's not helping. So, and I personally think, when we spoke to the youth in various states when you were moving around with the Sachar Committee, when you tell them that you are talking about a small proportion of a shrinking job market, why are you fighting for that? Because that's not something which will get you large dividends. When you talk to them personally, they agree. But politically, it is important for them to keep on talking about it, right? So, I mean, in terms of gains, the community is not going to gain much through these reservations unless you find a mechanism which is acceptable to the larger corporate job market, right? So it's, and that's why I'm saying diversity. I mean, diversity index is an idea which got picked up by the government of India. Nothing much is happening on that score, but there are committees who are trying to figure out how to implement that. UGC, University Grants Commission, has a diversity index in place, and now I don't know how they'll implement it. And when people talk about reservation to the corporate sector, everybody resists it. But you put it differently, it might work. And then if that works, this reservation will become redundant. So you may continue this, but it's redundant. Nobody will even actually be politically interested in it.
But in education?
Sorry?
But in education?
So in education, the same thing, right? I mean, you give some additional grants to education institutions to have a diverse student population. Yeah.
On the same point as the gentleman who graduated from IPS, was saying about in the service there are like different caste-based organizations and officers and things like that. The point you're saying is if though the job market is shrinking for the government services, still if the services or the policy makers are divided in this level, there is entrenched discrimination in the system, which will come up with policies which are discriminatory for the long. That is what the point. Even if the percentage of jobs are reducing and if reservation is not there for construction, that could affect negatively. That's what one point I was thinking.
So you're saying that even a small proportion gets in the future, in time T2, you will have a bureaucracy which will be more receptive to.
Yeah, because you are not at the table, right? Example being like I was working for a private company, and they were deciding about giving holidays. There were at the table one community was not there, so they got to, because out of 10 days they had to divide.
Right.
In India.
Right.
So they had to divide, and since no one is there from that community, they didn't get holiday on that day. So that's the example I'm saying. The other question I had was about the 4.5 reservation, percent reservation, the EPR for the central job. Is it helpful, or because already they were saying OBCs already have quota in the general OBC, Muslim OBCs.
Yeah.
Is there any difference?
So I mean, if you are giving 4.5% to the Muslim community as a whole, then at the margin it is helpful, and because OBCs are already getting it. But my point is that there is such a small proportion of people who reach there, and the total number of jobs that are getting generated is so small. So in terms of larger impact, I don't know what we are achieving. I mean, so politically a lot is made out of this whole game, but in terms of the impact on the community, I personally think is not going to be very high.
My question is the percentage-wise.
Yeah,
Sorry, just clarification. The percentage-wise, the Muslim OBC is getting reservation from the OBC category.
Yeah, they are already getting it.
What is the percentage versus what the 4.5%?
So there is, so there are two ways of dealing. Some states, what they have said is that Muslim OBCs get clubbed with all OBCs. So their complaint is that they get clubbed with other OBCs, they don't get anything. So they are trying to say that you create a sub-quota within the OBC quota. So that's one way to deal with it. The other way is where the UPR is talking about general, excuse me, sorry. The other thing is to create reservation for Muslims as a whole, which the UP government is talking about. That the constitutional status of that is something which one needs to figure out. Yeah.
Question related to the question that he asked. What was the impact of of increase in eligible population for SC, ST, and OBC through reservation? Was that because at one point they were far lower in terms of higher education statistics than Muslims, right? So they have obviously come far off, and largely through reservation, right? So how would you explain that, and what has been the impact? Has there been a study on how reservation impacted?
So there are studies on. So the argument runs like this: that if you have a chance of getting jobs in the government sector after you finish an undergrad degree, then there is incentive for you to go to college and then get the degree. And that is the reason why SCs have shown a higher increase in recent periods. But there are some studies who argue that reservation at the employment stage has created incentives to cross the threshold. There are other studies which show that the impact has been quite marginal. So the jury is still out on that. It's not very clear whether they are creating significant impact. But if you look at 2009-10 data, which I have put together, Muslims have actually come very close to SCs in terms of higher education. So they're almost the same percentage. And for Muslims, except for OBCs, which has come now, there is no reservation, right? So whether it was reservation which was pushing the SC percentage, because ultimately the number of jobs the SCs get is not so large. I mean, ultimately, to my mind, the supply side effect is significantly more. That's not. Yep.
Okay, I think we end the session formally here.
Okay, thank you so much.